All right. I don't know if you can tell. You probably can. It's got a little sun today. How beet red it doesn't show up too bad on the camera. A little bit red, but it's way worse in person. I look like a lobster. Oh, there you go. You can see the farmer's tan. Alrighty. So, if this is your first time checking out this video series that I'm working on, I'll give you the rundown real quick. So what I generally do on here is I'm of the philosophy that any two creative people given the same building blocks will create entirely different stories. I believe this so thoroughly that I don't worry too much about people taking ideas that I come up with to make new stories out of. And to model that same approach, I tend to take a look at pop culture, break it down, and then use the pieces from it to construct a new story with the same building blocks. And I periodically do this in sort of my reviews. I'll do a review of watching something for the first time and then break it down into 6 ideas. I haven't done one of those in a little while, but we've done a year of projects last year, and this year, at one point earlier this year, we did, I think I did 12 or 13 pop culture pieces. So we did like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, just some of the ones I remember fondly from when I was younger, and said, all right, what if we wrote a new story idea or came up with a new story setting or story premise inspired by the elements of this? And so given the same building blocks, so I break down this story of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Ghostbusters or Stargate SG-1, and then use those building blocks to come up with a new story. And we got some pretty good ones. I have to say, my Raven Sisters Detective Agency idea, I think, is still one of my favorites. I actually think the last round out, the new idea we had for the Buffy the Vampire Slayer series was actually one of the ones I thought was really good. But we did 13 or so of those where we broke them down and came up with new stories inspired by them. I wrote all the data down in my laptop and we did the videos of it. And then as we moved on to a few other projects, I had a hard drive crash. It just wrecked it completely. And it obliterated the records I was keeping. We still have the videos I shot where I brainstormed the new story ideas on here, but I avoided them because this was my opportunity. I get to be creative person 1 and creative person 2, given the same writing prompts, see what stories I can come up with. I don't remember all of what I did. I think what we did last time for, I basically took the whole 13 story ideas and redid them, mainly because I don't remember what I did the last time. I can go back and watch the videos and get them if I need to, but having not remembered them was a perfect opportunity to generate entirely different stories inspired by the same works. So I think right now what we're working on is Toy Story. And I think last time for Toy Story, if I vaguely recall, it was something about paper, like the paper marks that one leaves in their life, was it like birth certificates or love letters or something like that? And you made those pieces of paper. I think I did something like they origami fold themselves up into characters. I don't remember. I really don't remember much past that point. But it's on the record back there if you want to go look for it. But what I'm doing right now is, because I don't quite recall, and I know I could go back and look at any time I want to, I'm setting myself the task of reimagining a new story inspired by the same elements as Toy Story and whatever we came up with last time. Just giving myself those exact same parameters. What new story can we come up with? And so for Toy Story, the basic premise as I see it is Toy Story is sort of an illustration of an aspect of human life. In many cases, it's that's transition from young childhood into older childhood. So like the part of the story, it feels like to me at least, with Toy Story, the original Toy Story movie, was Andy had a random collection of toys, like a bunch of toys that were representative of his imagination and wonder and play. And it almost really didn't matter what toys you had to play with. It was the stories you were telling while you were playing, the life you gave those toys. You know, Mr. Potato Head and a dinosaur are friends to a cowboy. Like, it doesn't have to make sense. That's the wonder and imagination of a child. And those toys had a life of their own, fulfilling that role in their child. And as the kid gets older, he kind of falls in with the slightly more structured toy of Buzz Lightyear. So Buzz Lightyear represents a change in Andy's worldview of play. Okay, why is there a fruit fly in this room? There's no fruit in here. So Andy's play changes when he gets a Buzz Lightyear, or well, maybe it changes and he gets a Buzz Lightyear as a symptom of that change, where what he's looking for now is not a toy that you can just sort of imagine being any cowboy with any other play toys, but the theme of why are you flying in my face while I'm on camera? His imagination has sort of become subsumed into the story generated for the toy. So like, what's his name? Oh, Woody. Woody is a hero, but he's just any hero. But Buzz Lightyear is a character from a TV series. Now, we do find out in later series that there was a Woody and Friends TV series. But I do get the sense, at least in the movie, that Woody was a toy inherited or acquired by Andy without the premise of like a franchise that he's buying into. Whereas Buzz Lightyear was very distinctly like, you see the aspect of him in a toy store where he sees so many other ones of him. Buzz Lightyear is an off-the-rack story that is a consumerist story for Andy to buy into, whereas Woody is a little bit different. So it's the transition from that freeform imagination to one that makes you a little bit more of the cultural patterns of pop culture where he's in. And this is all to kind of lead in the direction of saying, like, the story is a sort of a transition in the lives of certain people where we go from our world being us and whatever magic and wonder we can put into it to being a part of a greater cultural aspect and buying some of that cultural buy-in, that consumption of the cultural narrative. This is getting a little heady for something that starts out as a children's story, but where this is coming into play is if we take that same premise of a story of somebody whose magic, wonder, and imagination is transitioned over into somebody who bought into a cultural narrative of a consumer of cultural narratives that they then adopt as their identity and their exploration of creativity. So it's sort of like the imposition of formula on a free-form creative person. And now there is, I think I mentioned in one of the last episodes, there's the risk of going in a weird, well, not weird, almost dark way of doing this, where it's sort of like transitioning the story over to a story less about toys and children and play and more about creativity, wonder, and imagination. I was looking to transition this over into a story about artists, creativity, writers, creative fields, and the tendency of those types of environments to be exclusive and to quash the wonder and childlike joy in creativity in favor of a more like, if you think about like art galleries and paintings, that starts to shift more into like, who are your buyers? Who are your collectors? Who are the ones who are using you as an investment? They're investing in you as an artist. Who are those people? And what are you creating to suit that audience? And it's moved away from the expression of the wonder and the sort of the romance of, I mean, I tend to view creative ventures like writing and painting even as a sort of a linguistic expression, a communication of the mind, feeling, and patterns of the creator as a way of like talking to the observer. And that sort of expression, that communication, that conversation through space and time. Like an artist can create a piece of work that hangs in a gallery for centuries, long after they're dead, and still be communicating with somebody in the future that encounters their work, and that creator has said something to the person, to the observer. And that observer doesn't have to be a consumer of that artwork. They don't have to be well, I mean, I guess technically they are consuming it, but they're not, it's not a commercial transaction. It's not a, it doesn't, the thing communicated by those artworks isn't solely about, you give me this, I'll get you that. It's more about, I am this, I think this, what does this mean to you? Can you see me? I mean, that's an entirely different communication level. And I feel like looking at it from that perspective, there's room for taking the Toy Story structure and idea in a way to communicate this same concept. So where I was originally going that seemed a little dark with this concept was the idea of maybe going in the direction of an artist who, he or she is starts out with this vibrant worldview and communicating everything about themselves, and gradually realizing that in order to get in front of other people, to reach people with your form of communication, is impossible. Because you can paint all you want, but it can oftentimes feel like shouting into the void. There's a lack of sense on the other end of that you've reached somebody, that you've communicated something to somebody. And so that sense of disconnect, that you're just shouting into the void, can lead one to doubt and Stupid fruit fly, stop it. It can lead one to lose track of. You had your chance, dude. All right, so sorry about that. The lack of sense of connection, the lack of sense of being heard, or that there's even room for somebody to listen to what you do, can lead some to abandon what they're working on. And so you could easily tell the story of somebody who starts out as a vibrant communicator and slowly just seems like they're being worn down until they give up trying to communicate. And they end up just another member of the world, not reaching out, closed off, going gray, losing that vibrance and that color. And, there's the way to tell that story where you end up with the creator losing that vibrance, but eventually the things that they once created finding their way before somebody and communicating that vibrance to that other person. That's certainly one of the ways to do that. I think what I want to go with a little bit more here, though, is using the idea of the Toy Story methodology of giving life to the imagination of the character. So we're not going to be using a child moving through the realm of imagination and play, but instead we're going to be looking at a artist who creates works. And we can continue the story in that direction of those works, telling the story from the perspective of the works, but telling the story of an artist who doesn't really create anymore, who's left some of that behind him to adapt to and survive in a world that doesn't care to hear what stories he's trying to tell. And so it's these stories of these artworks who they represent a wonder, a vibrance, and a creativity that once existed in this artist. And that sense that that artist is leaving some of that behind may be visible in the world and the interactions of the artworks trapped in their little bubble. And that bubble will be the void that the artist felt like they were shouting into. So that bubble would be the paintings in the artist's apartment, the small world that the artist lives in and that their art doesn't seem to escape, never reaching escape velocity to make it outside the edges of it. But maybe the quest of the characters and the images and the wonders that the artist creates, finding their kind of struggle and their adventure within themselves and their space, and finding a way to maybe breach out past the edges and set in motion some things that make what the artist says reach somebody else, and that somebody else hearing the message from seeing the artworks that to them are just stationary artworks, would be the thing that gets that void, that bubble burst, so that it's on display for others to see. That communication actually reaches somebody who has the means to pass it on and let it spread further, and leads that artist to open back up and start communicating again. So this is less dark, and this is less about an artist who shrivels up, dies, and goes dark from lack of sunlight, like a flower shut in a closet. It's less about that and more about, like, I feel like the way to do this would be paintings is one of the best ways to do something like this. And I feel like part of the reason that kind of works for my mindset, I mean, you could do sculptures, but I don't think that's really where I want to go. Like, sculpture would be just walking toys of a different kind. I think what I want to do is more like, believe it or not, the Harry Potter paintings. The paintings that talk with each other and move from frame to frame and move around inside of each other. And like having that ability for them to move, and like you have the chance for the artist to stop noticing when his pictures don't look the way that they did the last time. He just doesn't look at them anymore. He stopped hearing his own communication. He stops hearing that communication from his past self, who had so much to say. He's just stopped listening to it. He's forgotten who he was then. And if you take that concept and you make the paintings the living animated painting spirits that they were in Harry Potter, you have the opportunity for a painting feeling neglected, making a run for it. Maybe onto a billboard, maybe somebody moves into an apartment across the way and you can see through their windows that they have artworks there. And that sort of opens up a portal to move through into other places and to reach new spaces. And through that kind of interaction, kind of meddling in the world that brings somebody new, an outside voice who will appreciate the artwork of the artist, to notice the artist's work from across the way. And that communication, that change of silence to being heard, is the thing that cracks open that artist and makes them feel heard, and makes it feel like they can speak some more because they know they can be heard again. And they'll re-embrace, and they'll hear their own works again and remember the wonder and creativity that they had once before, and re-embrace that. Introduce new creations and expand the world that was created by the artist before. I kind of like that idea. I think that really works. And I mean, if you're telling it from the perspective of the artworks as they move through the world, through graffiti, graffiti, yes. Street art out on the street is being the one that opens that doorway. Somebody climbing up on a higher level to do a higher up splash, looking in through the window and noticing the artist has his paintings hung, and sort of having a little bit of a fascination with some of the works they saw, and coming back again and again to do graffiti in the area, and doing that graffiti, maybe once or twice get caught by the artist, and that the interaction should not always be positive from the get-go. Like the artist having sort of lost their voice sees the street artist and thinks like, you better stop or I'm gonna report you. And so there's that kind of clash. But at some point in the story should lead back around to that street artist hearing what the artist is saying through the artworks. And gradually the artist, feeling heard, wakes back up to their creative self and the stories that their pieces tell them. Yeah, I think there's a way to do that. And I do think that's a very fascinating approach of looking at the characters and the development of And it's weird because it is essentially just telling the Toy Story story, but it feels so different and to a certain degree a bit more matured than Toy Story. I like it. So I think at some point, basically what we're looking at is an artist who's communicating their experience and their views and their creativity to the world through their works, but their works don't go anywhere. Your paintings, like, nobody's noticing them. It's like, I don't want to sound dismissive, but it's sort of like singing in a room full of people who can't hear. And so they don't notice what you're doing. And so after a while, it wears on you that nobody can hear what you're trying to say. You stop speaking. And so this artist starts to give up on the art, and they sort of become embittered because they never got heard. And they stop paying attention to their own artwork because they just assume it's not worth anything. Nobody heard it. Nobody listened to me when I was doing this. This is all just the playing of somebody who wasn't worth hearing. And so they're not worth hearing. And that's the mindset that sets in on the artist. But we have, at that time, a street artist who starts putting up graffiti out on the street below. And you have room for that. The artist who's feeling unheard and given up, sort of bitter at somebody else creating noise in their environment with this clashing, garish expression. He can't see it as art anymore because it's just noise. It's somebody else making worthless sound in his environment. And so he sees it, and the street artist, while creating the street art, sees the artist's work in this stodgy, stuffed up apartment not going anywhere, and sees it as almost like those things are trapped in this space. They're not being shared. They're not being spread around. And part of that may be the interaction between the paintings and the street art. But eventually you're going to have the street artist and the artist clashing about, like, their personality types clashing. The person who's given up and the person who's freely embracing their creativity. And through their clashing, you can have a situation in which, like, say, the street artist makes an offer on, basically wants to free those paintings. And the artist being willing to just get rid of the paintings because they're a reminder of things that nobody cared about. I feel like the change at that point has to be handled right. They can't decide to sell it, because that in itself kind of communicates that they found somebody who's hearing it. The artist should give the sense that that they feel like the work they made is being mocked. And so perhaps it's even just throwing out their work, eventually just giving up and throwing it out. And then the street artist reclaiming it and in their interactions in the subsequent future, have it come to light that the artist finds out that his work is actually being heard now, because it reached that street artist, and the street artist helped it reach further. And being heard at that point sort of wakes the artist back up, and they get to see, maybe even like the artist does the street artist does a gathering with other artists, and they put up the rescued artwork as part of the exhibit. And the artist finds out about it and goes and sees their artwork on display, and sees that it's reaching other people, and other people are hearing that part of him again. And he encounters the artwork again for almost like the first time, like re-seeing who he was back then and the things he was saying, and finds that part again, reconnects with those pieces, and reawakens that part of him that communicates to create more new things. And I feel like that's a really, really good story. And like the tendency I want to have for a story like that is for the story to be told at least mostly from the perspective of the artist. But this is going to be a little bit more of being told from the perspective of the artwork. And the artwork would have to have some of the same limitations put on it that the toys in Toy Story would have. Like, the toys in Toy Story notably break the master rule of don't look like you're alive in front of living people. They do it once. But I like the idea of artworks that are supposed to look stationary and not obviously changed to the people who see them. But they have to be able to move about and interact. So moving in and out of frames, like the paintings in Harry Potter, where they can move into each other's frames and interact. And the street artists' graffiti are almost like if you could only move between mirrors, imagine lining them up so that you've got mirrors all in one room, and windows that look out on a bare stone wall or something like that, or a cityscape without any mirrors in it. And then someday somebody comes along and sets a mirror up opposite of you. And suddenly getting from your mirror into that mirror gets you into the outside world. And then there's a whole skyscraper full of mirrored windows that you can bounce from and move into other buildings and other mirrors elsewhere, mirrors on cars, and go for a travel. That whole ability to move around opens up a whole world for you to travel through. And so I feel like that concept, instead of mirrors being artworks, where artworks are trapped in that apartment where the person who created them is the only one who's ever seen them, and he doesn't even see them anymore. So they're moving around between each other, having their lives stuck in the little bubble that they're stuck in. And then someone comes along and puts an artwork up on a wall outside, and they've set up your escape path. Because once you move from the artwork interior and you move to the artwork on the exterior, that exterior points into 100 other windows with 100 other pieces of artwork. And so you've got freedom. But that freedom, that escape from the confines that you were trapped in, where you couldn't be heard because even the person who created you isn't listening anymore, that escape from that environment isn't the same as being heard, which is the goal of the communication that artwork is. So, yeah, I think that maps really well to the concept of Toy Story. I do think I'm liable to lean a little bit more even split between the story of the artwork and the story of the artist, because I feel like the complexity of the story of the artist, having gone silent and not hearing his own stories and not sharing them anymore, it's a story I feel like needs to be more directly observed, because it's got more nuance and it's got more complexity, I think than, and not that there isn't complexity in the idea of Toy Story, where it's a child growing up and their change in how they play and how they imagine. There's complexity in that, but I can reasonably, in a sentence or two, lay out the pitch for that idea. The pitch for the artist is a little more difficult, and the implications of the story are more philosophically complex, that they're not as easily communicated in a short pitch. Not that you can't find an elevator pitch for that story, but I do think that's kind of the way I want to go with it. I think that works, and you can kind of see how much sun I got today. Yeah, you can kind of see it in my arms. The light hides it well, but I got a little bit of sun today. Hopefully it heals up, because it's itchy right now. It's really red for me. That's a really dark red. Like, you can't see it, I don't think. Yeah, there is some coloring there, but it's much more red on my side. Anyway, so I really think that's sort of where to leave the Toy Story, and I think that leaves us. I think we've only got one left out of the set of stories that we did the last time, and that is Matilda. I think I had a brief idea for it, but I got so distracted with other things I can't remember what it was. But I guess we'll leave that for next time, won't we? We're almost at 40 minutes anyway. So I will try to be back. What's tomorrow? Tomorrow's Saturday. I've been going to some of the online conventions that are going on right now. I did attend one from Gen Con today. First one of my Gen Con ones. They use Zoom. I did all right with that. The one I was looking at in New Zealand, the World Con in New Zealand, they do have a ticket price. And it was like, I think it was 300 New Zealand dollars, which is something like 200 US dollars. I'm not paying $200 to watch videos online. I don't need to do it. They had some really good panels, it sounded like. But my experience at convention panels is they give you a broad overview of a concept that you can look into further. But I don't think they've ever fully, I don't think they've ever, there are very few panels I feel like have ever quenched my curiosity by themselves. They're an introduction to a concept. So I'm not going to pay $200 to get 7 introductory videos. I took down the names of some of the panels that I was looking at, and I will seek that information somewhere else. But Gen Con, I got mostly the free ones, and I signed up. You did have to click an order for them, and I ordered, I think, 7 or 8 panels. And so I'm most, the bulk of them I think are tomorrow. There might be some on Sunday too. And VidCon still releases some stuff regularly, so I'm keeping an eye on that. VidCon has a Discord, and Gen Con both have a Discord, so I'm going to see if I can play around on some of those and network with some other creative people on there. And San Diego Comic-Con was good. I don't think I've ever found out if they had a Discord. And I do believe VidCon, San Diego Comic-Con, and Gen Con are uploading some of their videos to YouTube. So if you look up Gen Con on YouTube, you can see some of the videos that they've already done. Not all of them. And there are several, they're a day or so behind, I think, in uploading them. Same with VidCon. San Diego Comic-Con, you can actually go onto theirs, and pretty much everything that happened in their convention is up, or at least most of the ones that I was interested in seeing, they're already up on their YouTube channel. So those are, if you get the chance to look through some of them, they're kind of worth it, I think. I don't know if I'll pursue too many more conventions. I think there comes a point where you can go to so many panels about a topic before you just have to start playing with the topic yourself. I think that's kind of where I'm thinking about going in the near future, is just bringing some new projects to fruition. So like some of these writing projects, coming up with a new storyline. I've got the storyline. It might be worth it to write them up and either script them to be shot as a video series, which then leads into independent filmmaking, which is more labor and cost intensive, or self-publishing short stories on Kindle, which is much cheaper to do, or doing some graphic novels where I have to find an artist perhaps to do some of that with me. So, and board game design. I need to finish up some of my designs from last year's designs and get them out there and just see if we can get that going. But for now, I guess it's time to say thank you for joining me tonight. I appreciate you watching and sharing thoughts and feelings about these projects if you have any. You can comment below or feel free to comment during a live stream. Seems to be all I'm doing these days anymore. I will get back to doing some edited uploads at some point. And until then, take care and have a good night. I just about crashed my computer there. Should not have hit that button by accident. And my skin is itchy. That's definitely a sunburn right there, that is. All right, take care. I will catch you tomorrow.